Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
Hey, welcome to Overtime with Dr. Michael Jacobs. I'm Chip Franklin, where we discuss the issues that obviously affect these players. Number one is, how can I stay healthy and stay on the field? Doc, we heard Jim Palmer, who is part of that legion of pitchers from 60s and the 70s that had these Herculean performances compared to today. I mean, today, when a pitcher gets like 66 pitches, they start looking at the bullpen. I mean, that could have been the third inning for some of these guys. How do you explain the fact that they could throw for a career and never get Tommy John? And they had injuries, but not have to go all the way there. Was there something about that time with these species of ball players?
Well, I think it's called Darwinian natural selection. I think it's a complex issue. I actually have a 71 almanac, and if you look at it, there's maybe 6 pitchers who threw 300 innings: Mickey Lolich, Koufax, Jim Cott. And Palmer also told me that one year he pitched over 400 innings.
What does the average pitcher throw today about? In a season?
200 innings a milestone. I'd say today the average starter throws 150 innings.
Wow.
And the reasons for that are multiple. Number one, we have all this technology that can diagnose things earlier. And in medicine, it's, for example, a reason when I was in medical school, if you had kidney cancer, almost everybody died. And now the death rate is incredibly low. And the reason, not incredibly low, but it's low. And the reason isn't that the treatment's a whole lot better, which it is to some degree. But I've had 2 or 3 patients who came in with back pain. I did an MRI of their back, and it picked up a completely unknown kidney cancer. So it was caught so early, it was cured. So the technology has picked up many, many injuries very early. So whereas in the old days, you had ice, you had aspirin, you probably didn't even have Motrin. You had cortisone shots. So a patient came in, a player came in, my arm sore, you iced it, you sat him down a few days, and as Palmer has said innumerable times, he's pitched with a rotator cuff tear. So a lot of guys can pitch with cuff tear, partial, thick. A lot of guys can pitch without their Tommy John ligament. As I can't mention names, but there's some very famous pitchers out there who I have been told, not that I examined, finished their careers very effectively having no Tommy John ligament. So part of it is they just went on and they couldn't go to the MRI tube and get diagnosed. Part of it is the very good way people take better care of themselves now. So when their arms hurt, they do seek treatment. And of course, you have agents who are always trying to, in a positive way, in a negative way at the same time, justify their importance. So they're there to protect their players. So they jump all over these injuries. And I remember I told you this.
Can I interrupt you there? Because I think you just hit something on really important, is that they're trying to protect them as a financial franchise. So for them to throw 300 innings would really endanger the investment in themselves. So you're saying some part of this is not that these guys can't throw these many innings, but they're not allowed to because it would hurt their overall performance over a period of time of maybe their contract. Is that possible?
I think, yes. I think in general, every pitcher has a different body type, but there's a limit to how much you can throw. There are not many Verlanders or Scherzers who can throw into their 40s. And you've got to figure, it's frankly, to me, I always wondered as a kid, being a baseball guy, why when, Koufax is up 8-1 and they're in the 7th inning, why they don't take him out to save him.
Right.
But back then, these guys, I mean, I guarantee you Koufax, Spahn, Mickey Lolich, Cott,
Gibson.
Gibson. I guarantee you in the 60s and 70s, any one of them had more complete games in a year than all of the major leagues combined today. And if you look at it, I mean, you're looking at Denny McClain when he won 30 games, had like 26 complete games. That's probably more than the whole league had last year.
I think Cy Young had like 250 complete games in his career.
Well, we can't. That's a whole other world, That's going back to horses and buggies. I mean, you really can't go all the way back. But I think it's the diagnosis is better. And I've told you this story before when one of our star pitchers came in and Boris was his agent and it was his walk year. and he was pitching very well, but I put him on the DL because he had some tendonitis, and he said he couldn't pitch, coming off a good performance. I went to talk to Phil Regan, and as you know, Phil, they didn't call him the Vulture for nothing. I mean, Phil's like 6'5" with this big Irish face and a big head and these beady little eyes. And he wanted to know why we were putting him on the DL, pretty much scaring the whatever out of me. And I said, Phil, his arm hurts. He says he can't pitch. And Phil said, using more colorful language, my arm hurt every blanky time I went out there. And I looked at Phil. I said, Phil, this isn't 1963. People don't pitch like that anymore. So it's a mentality, but the imaging has changed, just like we were talking about these guys with all these lat tears. A lot of them would have been blown off in the old days because you didn't have the imaging. I said, he's got a sore shoulder. We'll rest him a month. And much like Eflin's struggling, he probably could have gone back out in a couple of weeks and been suboptimal but pitched. But now that you've got the imaging, everybody's much more proactive in protecting their longevity. And in many, many ways, it's a very good thing. But in some ways, you're missing some pitchers who could throw 300 innings. And there's a very famous game from, I think, 61 or 62 that was listed in Sports Illustrated, turn of the century, the 10 best baseball games ever. Back in the early 60s, when Juan Marichal was a rookie, he and Warren Spahn went to the ninth inning in a 0-0 game. And it went 15 innings. And I think Alvin Dark was the manager of the Giants.
Alvin Dark.
And he kept saying to Marichal, you want to come out? You got to save yourself. And every time he said that to Marichal, he said, as long as that old blankety blank Spahn guy comes out, I'm coming out too. They both pitched complete 15-game shutouts until Willie Mays hit a home run.
You know, you said
he must have thrown 200 pitches. And interestingly, the next day, Warren Spahn went up to Marichal and said, look, you threw a lot of pitches yesterday. Let me tell you how to recover from that so you don't blow your arm out. So it was a different world back then.
Well, Marichal was the guy that when Roseboro threw that ball close by his ear, he took the bat and hit him over the head, you know, the catcher when he was batting. I mean, that was a tough squad. And it takes me back to the original question about, I think it is a little bit of old school, but I also think it's what you're saying too. It's medicine, it's business and everything. Of all the pitches that these guys throw, which one do you think is the hardest on the arm? And let me start with that question with a little preface by saying they don't throw the screwball anymore because the cut fastball seems to work like a screwball, like for a right-handed pitcher on right-handed batters, right? I mean, it kind of comes in.
I disagree a little bit. I think the pitch that works like a screwball now is the changeup. All of these changeups tend to tend back. Right. And if I remember, I used to talk to Buck a lot.
And that's easy on the arm, right? A changeup is you're just holding it like, you know.
There's a million ways to throw a changeup. Yeah. And I've said this earlier, and I think one of the problems with analytics and not having real pitching coaches, I'm sure that'll go down well, but is that every pitcher has different anatomy. Every pitcher has different innate potential. I've told you this before. Again, I can't use names, but we had a 98-mile-an-hour fastball pitcher who had kind of short, stubby fingers and was real stiff. And as his fastball lagged, he got into this Vulcan change, which acted a little bit like a screwball. It was a half split, half screwball. And it was killing guys, but it was killing his elbow because his fingers were so short and stiff. He kind of had to horse it down with his elbow. And I talked to him about not throwing it so much. And of course, he said, Doc, that's my out pitch. I got to throw it. I talked to the pitching coach, and he said, Doc, that's his out pitch. He's got to throw it. And he blew out his elbow the next year and was finished. And I think I told you before, we had Lee Smith, who is triple jointed, not even double jointed. He's got these basketball Connie Hawkins-sized fingers. And he would throw splits all over the place and he was never in the training room except to sleep at the beginning of a game. And I said to Jesus, Lee, how come that doesn't bother you? And he said, I don't know, Doc. He says, I just put the ball in between my two fingers and without even trying, it went all the way back. And he said, when I get out to extend, I just kind of flip my wrist down and the ball splits. Well, if your wrist can bend all the way back and your fingers are this long, you can throw whatever you want. So it really depends on what you want. I remember
And Lee Smith is probably one of the more underrated closers in baseball history, I would think.
he was great. I got to tell you, he was unbelievable. We played a game against the Tigers when they had Trammell Whitaker, Parrish, and those guys. And we were up by a run in the ninth inning. And there was a guy on base, and Lou Whitaker hit a home run on a 3-1 pitch, and we lost. And he is real chatty and personable. And I asked him about it in the training room because he was sitting there. And I said, geez, does that get to you? The guy says, hell no, Doc. He goes, let me tell you, I wasn't walking Whitaker to get to Trammell, Parrish, and Gibson. I was throwing him a strike. If he hits it over the fence, if that little guy hits it over the fence, power to him. But I wasn't walking him. He hit it over the fence. That's the way it goes. Not a problem. But I wasn't walking him to get to those other three guys. That's a guy who knows how to pitch, right?
So what you're telling me is that basically every pitcher's a little different as to what pitch could cause him damage, right? Depending on their body type and all that. I mean, obviously a fastball, a four-seam fastball, the guys that throw 102, 103, those guys, they can't do that for their entire career. You saw Bautista, learn the splitter, which has made him a different pitcher without the velo that he had from, 2 years ago. I just was thinking, they always tell young kids to wait before they throw curveballs because it can hurt their arm at a young age. Is that changing, or can younger people throw curveballs?
I think parents are still pushing their kids to be Hall of Famers in Little League. Yeah. I could say two things. Number one, I remember 3 years ago when we were in the playoffs, I was watching Bradish throw off 5 and 6 hard sliders after another. And I remember I actually said something to Hyder. I said, if he keeps throwing 90% sliders, he's going to hurt his elbow, Doc. And he said, Doc, that's his out pitch. I got the same answer. And in the case of Little Leaguers, it's the same thing. And Little Leaguers would probably do better if not only they banned curveballs, but they'd let the kids use smaller balls. Because, I remember talking to Messina, asked him how he learned to throw that knuckle curve. And he said, well, I always wanted to pitch. And he said, when I was kind of a teenager, I would get a tennis ball can and just practice flipping that can with a 90 degrees kind of curveball motion. Then he'd dig his nails into it. So it's, again, depends on how well your hand can fit around the ball as opposed to having small fingers, big fingers, being loose jointed. And another thing that always bothered me is guys who hit the ball behind their back. I remember watching Rick Aguilera pitch for the Mets, and they used to say it was hard to pick up the ball from him, but he would tuck the ball all the way behind his back, which was true. But at the same time, for him to get his arm back, he really had to overextend his elbow and whip it forward, and that takes a toll. Maybe Louis Tion could do it, but there aren't many Louis Tions out there. So
Doc, I'm betting you can watch a guy pitch and say, "Oh, that's going to catch up to him later on." Right?
Sometimes I said that about Casey Mize when I looked at film of him when he was the first draft pick. I watched him pitch in college, and he was throwing a zillion splits, and it looked like he was really working hard to do it. And they didn't ask me because that's just the way it was then. But I said to the other doc who we were assessing, I said, he's going to have his elbow. He's going to need Tommy John surgery. Yeah. I said that's an energy intensive pitch for him. And I said the sad thing is you can't do it now, but it'll probably happen just when the team's getting good. And he's pitching well now finally, but that can happen in that setting. So everybody's different, but it is sad that there are the Mark Fidriches out there who got blown out early, but you are missing the Palmers and the Gibson and the McLeans and the Mickey Loliches who could just keep going forever, or the Marichals. Just look at, I remember when we printed T-shirts up for Jesse Orozco. He went 18 years as a pitcher and never went on the DL. Amazing. That's
Doesn't
incredible.
He have a major league record for appearances in games? I think as a pitcher, I think he does.
He did at one time. I suspect it's been passed, but he did. And he threw that. He just naturally could throw that slider, which I guess was more of a cutter by today's words. But he could just throw that cutter effortlessly, and it just didn't bother him. So you do miss something, but by and large, I think it's good to protect the pitchers. The problem today is the analytics, and having all these guys go for the crazy spin rates that are, it throw as hard as you can for 5 innings and have your Tommy John and we'll see you later. And as Palmer said, the pitching coaches knew what the spin rates was. They didn't need a meter to tell them. They could see how the ball was moving.
Didn't he? Didn't he say the batters will tell you what the spin rate is by how they hit it, right?
Well, they'll tell you where the location is because as Bordick pointed a couple of weeks ago, Charlie Morton's spin rate was higher than ever this year, except his location was terrible early in the year.
Right. Doc, this is great. Next time I want to talk to you a little bit about the head game. Hey, have you ever heard of a major league team that brought in a psychiatrist to talk to players?
Oh, well, I think all the teams, they just call them performance people now. They all have that.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that next week, okay, when we do overtime. All right.
I'll have to check with my analyst and see if I can do that.
That is Dr. Michael Jacobs. I'm Chip Franklin. This is Overtime on Bmore Baseball Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.